I think from a coaching standpoint, it's a lot easier to keep somebody motivated when you know what they're working for and you understand what's important to them through questions and curiosity, just like you would talk to a customer. You don't want to tell the customer what's right. You want to help them self-discover it. You know, a customer understands what your value is when they can explain it back to you. The same thing is true. You know that a rep has learned something, grown, when it's their idea and then they go and get it. This is what you said you wanted to do. How do I help you go do that?
Today, we're talking to Chris Michelmore, a senior sales leader at Zoom. Chris has spent almost 9 years with the company, ascending all the way from first-time SDR to head of mid-market acquisition. Today, we're chatting about his journey up the company ladder. Welcome to Grow and Tell, the show where revenue leaders tell the growth stories behind today's successful companies. I'm your host, Alex Krakov.
Grow and tell, grow and tell.
Today, Chris and I chat about what made him so successful as a seller, why coaching a sales rep is a lot like selling to a customer, what's different about leading directors versus AEs, and what it's like growing alongside a company in hypergrowth. I really appreciated Chris's leadership mindset, and I think you will too. Hope you enjoy. So I'd love to start today's conversation with when you joined Zoom back in 2016 as an SDR. Can you talk a little bit about kind of what led you to join Zoom at that time?
Absolutely, and I would love to. So I don't know how, please stop me if I go too far down the rabbit hole, but it's, I guess I'll just preface it high level with I was looking to get into tech sales. I wasn't in tech sales in any way, shape, or form prior to this. And so really the short answer is I fell in love with the product even from an outsider really, really quickly and really early on. And this was 2015. So it was still relatively newer of a product, but same thing we can say now as we said then, it just works and works so well. So it was easy to see that as an outsider. So for me, looking for a company, what I was looking for was the market fit and how well the product worked. In other words, could I answer for myself, well, I'd be really excited to sell this. That's essentially what, there's a longer story around how I got introduced to the company and why I pursued it, but that's what I was looking for.
And it is just such a magical product. I mean, I think about like the earlier iterations of video conferencing software. I think I used, probably WebEx and Blue Jeans and things like that. And it just didn't quite work the same. And I think I probably used Zoom probably the first time generally around that time. And it's like, oh, wow, this works. And the video is just so good. And it's just like so simple, but so amazing. And so, yeah, and I totally see why that's like, okay, I got to go work at that company if I'm going to go try and break into tech sales.
Yeah, absolutely. It's you want to be, it's a very fortunate thing. Not everybody can always say that at all points in their career, but it is a very fortunate thing to say, well, I'm selling something that really works and that I really believe in. So definitely was looking for that first.
Yeah. And it's so important as a salesperson to sell something you believe in, or else you'll just kind of like, you don't have the energy to get up every day and face the natural rejection of what is sales. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
And so you've held like 7 roles at Zoom, which I think might be like a first for a guest on our show. So I'd love to kind of walk through your career progression and kind of those different stages of your journey at Zoom. So, so you were an SDR for I think like 5-ish months before you got promoted into an AE role. Like, what made you so successful as an SDR at Zoom, and sort of how did you what was the SDR role like at Zoom back then?
Yeah, well, so personally, I kind of mentioned how I was looking to break into the tech sales, so I didn't come from this. So my answer really is just like a little bit of a chip on my shoulder, to be frank. So when I moved for this job, I realized that there was going to be a sacrifice involved, and I know we didn't get into that too much prior, but I actually moved from close to where you are. I moved from the San Francisco Bay Area, so I was out in San Jose, California, which is where our headquarters is. And my mindset really was, I moved my whole family. I had 2 kids at the time. I wasn't going to move my family halfway across the country and not give it everything I had. It was kind of like a proving moment that it was. So I think just mindset of, first day, what was the previous record? How do I go beat that? Second day, what was the record that I just broke? How do I go beat that? And I just kind of had that mindset from day one. Again, a little bit of a chip on my shoulder, and wanted to prove that I could make this work. So yeah, it was more of a mindset. I do think the other element of it, and this is not everybody this isn't like a a teachable thing, but I came from owning my own business. That's what I did prior to entering as an SDR. So again, I was willing, I just wanted to get in somehow. I didn't care what the role was. No ego about it by any means. And but I had the business, like if somebody gave me keys to the door right now and said, hey, you own a Zoom building, good luck, go after it. That was the mindset that I had. I basically owned my own franchise, and I was going to go figure out a way to make it work.
I love that approach. I mean, I think I had the same sort of chip on my shoulder and mindset when I first started at my previous role at Lattice, where I was hired as like this early marketing person. But from my perspective, I was like, I'm going to run this thing forever. Like, I'm going to be the VP of marketing. Like, this is my job. And I just kind of came in with that approach. And I think, and then that also elevated like what I did every day. You know, it wasn't like I just kind of like sat in my role. I was like, okay, I'm going to try and bear hug and much of this business and work my ass off too to kind of get it done. Do you think like, because every SDR in history like wants to go be an AE, they want to do exactly what you did. Like, what advice do you have for them? Is it really just it comes down to mindset and hard work? Is that kind of what you would say to them?
I think that so as you go up in different roles, what I've learned, right, is a lot less of it is in your control, especially when you go from that, when you make that switch from IC to manage a leader. Things start leaving your control on a day-to-day basis. And the beauty, the benefit of an SDR and an AE, but the earlier on roles, really you can outwork your job. And I really do think that's true. Again, as things start becoming out of your control, that you have to change your mindset. You have to adapt to that. But I think that's the best part about that role is you really truly can outwork the number out that. So mindset and hard work, I truly do believe that. But again, I think the common theme is just going to be treating it like it's your business too. The other, from a mindset standpoint, the thing I think that was the most helpful in the same context of owning a business was that nobody was going to, it's very easy, probably maybe more so as an AE, but it's like, oh, I don't have that tool. So that's why I didn't hit my number. Or I didn't get given, this level of support. So that's why I didn't hit my number. So if you go back to the owning your business mindset, nobody's going to say, hey, your bathroom's really dirty. And you go, well, somebody else will go clean that. No, you have to go find a way to go make it work. And so, and maybe live outside stop thinking of it as you have to live within the confines of just kind of what was given to you. So I don't know if it's kind of a little bit longer of an answer, but yeah, mindset and hard work.
Oh, I think it's a super important lesson because I think too many SDRs and especially in SDR world, it's like, there's too many cool tools. Everyone wants to use this thing and that thing, and they're going to try and automate it and use AI SDRs and whatever. And it's like, it's kind of just a grind, and you kind of just got to push forward and reach out to people and be a person and have that mindset. And that's like what ultimately works. I think it's honestly like a very important lesson that I think gets lost on, I don't know, like the new generation of outbound and kind of how we talk about that role, which is funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So after SDR, you move to an AE role, which I assume you're starting to close business and kind of really run the full sales process. Like, what was that transition like for you? Like, how did your skill set change? Like, I assume you kind of carried forward that same mindset and ownership mentality, but like, what was that journey like of sort of shifting your skill set to just kind of attracting business to, okay, now I got to actually run the full funnel and close the business too?
I think for me, and I'm sure everybody's different in this answer. So I'm not telling you how to think by any means, but the hardest part is then transitioning to asking people for their money. I think again, it's a benefit that I ran my own business. I was very comfortable doing that. Had to, you have to. Wasn't at first, definitely. So, but I think that's the same answer as, when I went, you go to start asking people for money and you got to try to change your mindset around them. So being better as an AE meant understanding their business better instead of like as an SDR, it's very much about you and you're trying to get your number, you're trying to make your calls, and it's all about you and your role. And the transition to AE is I had to make it all about them and about the customer and I had to do that in order to earn the right to start asking people for their money. You never had to do that as an SDR prior to that. So that would be the biggest mindset shift.
And you were selling, I think it's like the mid market. Like what does a mid market customer look like for Zoom, and how would you kind of describe that sales process? Was it fairly transactional and quick, or was it, a longer, felt more, maybe more enterprise, a lot of stakeholder sort of sales process? Like how did you sort of think about the customer and matching it to the sales process?
Yeah, it's so I would imagine it's very similar to most companies that I talk to as far as what a mid-market space is. So just, but in general, at that time, we were a little bit more inbound. We're trying to get to market. So there was a good balance between inbound and outbound efforts. We were both. Just to be clear, we weren't like separated or segregated or separated by only inbound or only outbound. We were both. So you had to get good at both those skills, which is another key point, right? So balancing the inbound and outbound. In general, what my takeaway on the mid-market space though is you got the size of the company that you're selling to really determines their buying process. Most mid-market companies really are trying to figure out what they want to do when they grow up too. They probably don't have a full built-out internal IT team. They're usually using outsourced programs, MSPs, partners. They might have one person in internal from an IT perspective, but they probably don't have like a CIO yet or a CTO. So understanding where they are in their life cycle is a huge part of selling into the mid-market space, because you're understanding how much they have to take on. A lot of those conversations are around how you make the IT, the software, people who manage the software, how do you make their life easier? How do you make it simpler on them? Because most oftentimes when you are selling to a mid-market company that is in that lower life cycle, they just want to be burdened. It's not that your product is or isn't a great fit for them or that's the right thing. And so we just don't have the bandwidth. We don't have, this is going to add more complexity. So that's a big hurdle to overcome in that space.
Did you think of your sales cycle as more like bottoms up or tops down? Because I assume you're working with this IT buyer, and then I imagine you eventually want to go wall to wall within the company, and you're going to sell, every single person at the company should have a Zoom license. Like that makes sense, right? If you're using this type of technology. But I imagine some people are like, ooh, let's try it with these people first, and then we kind of go from there. Or if I were you, I'd be like, well, this is the demo. This is the proof of concept. We're on the Zoom call right now, right? We're doing it right now, right? And so I'm curious how you thought about that, like proving value in the sales cycle, because it's a big decision for a mid-market company to say, hey, we're going to overhaul all of our video conferencing software. So how did you sort of prove the value in that process and think about it?
Yeah, love that question. And it really is a perfect mix between the two. Ideally, the benefit of a mid-market space is that you have easier access to a top-down sell. That's a for sure statement, right? Usually there's they wear many hats, the decision makers, and they're also accessible, and they're also trying to figure out how to make it work. So that's great, and the outbound motion makes it very, very, very solid approach. But what you have to get good at when you are balancing the inbound element, why is there an inbound element? Well, somebody at that company said, hey, I have a need, and we're kind of too small of a company. It's not really getting served, or maybe I have the ability to kind of go off on my own and figure out what's right for my role, what's going to make me successful. A lot of mid-market sized companies do provide that autonomy for their employees. So that's that building the champion motion and selling and creating groundswell, basically making the product a need within departments and teams, so that the above the line, the buyer is like, well, we don't have a choice now. So if you have a really good product fit, I think you're doing both at the same time, especially in the mid-market space. Probably not so much so in different segmentations, but definitely in the mid-market space.
Yeah, because I imagine the sale is so much easier once you kind of seed Zoom links to each little department, and then they start using it for their calls and things like that. And then you can go to the CISO or whoever the main buyer is and say, hey, look, all these teams are using it. It's really easy to buy the security features or whatever the things that they need. Yeah,
absolutely. Especially when you have, it depends on the company too. If you have a freemium type product, that bottoms up entry point becomes a lot easier. and it allows you to treat those users as leads and really dig in to understand the intricacies of the business. They're a little bit more willing to share the day to day, and which helps you build a great case when you do finally get access.
And then after like a year or so, I think you shifted into more of a manager role. So you're climbing through the ranks really quickly here at Zoom. Like, what was that transition like for you, going from, okay, closing the business and figuring out this customer to, okay, now actually you're coaching AEs and helping them close the business? Like, what was that transition like for you? Because I don't think you had done that before. Maybe as a business owner, you had some management experience, but yeah.
Well, I think there's two of them. One's a very traditional answer. The probably more straightforward answer is, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, um, giving up a little bit of control of the day-to-day success. That's definitely a big challenge. I think the other biggest challenge that I at least I try to talk to as many leaders as I can is getting the pitfall of caring more about their success. They, as in your direct reports, your reps, your team, caring more about their success than they do. And so you kind of try to, it's the difficulty of meeting them where they are, in meeting them where they are as far as what their drive is, what their passion is, and meeting that energy level. But then also at the same time understanding that at a certain point there's an element where you're giving up control of your day-to-day success. So that's a very difficult challenge. So that was, anybody has to learn that, myself included, by all means. The more enjoyable part of the transition for me, though, was again, a little bit from owning the business prior, but also coaching is what I love to do. And so if that's what you love to do, it very quickly outweighs the fact that you give up some of the control, because you're getting fulfilled much more. Your cup is being filled up much quicker by a number of people that you're helping versus just yourself and what you are going accomplishing. So for me, it filled my cup a whole lot faster being a manager or a coach.
And it's so great to see people succeed. I mean, that's the funnest part about managing people. There's like nothing better. Yeah. Like it's such a fun part. And the flip side, it's terrible when they're not succeeding and you got to be kind of, the firm leader and hold people accountable. Like that's not fun. But on the like coaching side of things, like how would you tactically go about kind of coaching a sales rep? Are you listening to call recordings and sharing feedback? Are you helping them write emails? Like, how do you sort of go about, like, what advice do you have for sort of coaching sales teams?
Yeah, I mean, all of the above. I think from a coaching standpoint, there's a couple key foundational items. So first of all, just understanding their why. It's a lot easier to keep somebody motivated when you know what they're working for, and you understand what's important to them. And that's what I meant. You can always come back to meeting them where they are as far as their drive and what their passions are. So definitely understanding why this is hard. Like this you're going to get shot down so much, so quickly, so often. Why are you doing this? Why do we keep doing this? And so that's a big part of it. But then asking, right, what is it? How do they like to be coached? How do they want to be coached? That is such a broad spectrum. So individually understanding that, but reviewing as much as they'll allow you to, right? Coming from asking, I think the better answer is just through questions. Through questions and curiosity, just like you would talk to a customer. You don't want to tell the customer what's right. You want to help them self-discover it. So I think from a coaching standpoint, the best thing, just like when a customer understands what your value is when they can explain it back to you. The same thing is true. That a rep has learned something, grown when it's their idea. When it's their idea, and then they go and get it, because one of the other challenges from transitioning to a manager is keeping people accountable. Well, keeping people accountable when it's only your ideas as the manager, and you're saying this is what we have to go do. This is without aligning that to their why, or realizing that they are not going to do it because of their motivation factors. If it's their idea, so much easier to keep them accountable to it. Say, hey, this is what you said you wanted to do. How do I help you go do that? So I think that's a big part of it.
I think anchoring it to their why and their goals is so important. I've always tried to do that as a manager because I think like depending on what their goals are, you like the way you work with them is so different. Like if one sales rep's like, I want to go be a CRO one day at a big company, then like you're gonna like maybe ride them a little harder or give them more leadership opportunities and things
Totally.
like that. Like right, like if they have that super sort of aggressive career goal, and then there's some sales reps who are maybe like, I just want to support my family and make a lot of money and then close my laptop at the end of the day and not worry about that because I have family and stuff. And so very different ways I think you would go about kind of coaching those people. And if you try and coach the CRO type candidate as the like family man, make a lot of money, it's going to conflict. And I think it's so important aligning it to the why. And that's why it's always something you can go back to too in those tough, conversations where it's like, hey, I'm trying to hold you accountable to being a better manager
Yes.
because you told me you want to go be a CRO eventually. And this is the skills. This is what you're going to have to do eventually. So I don't know. That's something I think I learned when I was at Lattice and it's just really stuck with me as like the way to approach management. And that way it makes it about them, not about you.
Absolutely. Exactly. I think that's I think it's just an element of humanness. It's like I said, the same principle is true whether you're talking to a customer. I mean, at that point, the reps are your customers, theoretically, and at least thinking of them that way.
And then as you've progressed in Zoom, you sort of moved, I think, beyond just a frontline sales manager. And I want to learn more kind of about your roles, but you went into like SMB segment leader, then senior, then head of SMB acquisition, head of mid-market acquisition. So I imagine you're a manager now. Can you talk a little bit about kind of, what are you doing today at Zoom?
Yeah. So you're right. So the next iteration of that was manager of managers, and we're growing a lot, and now you're starting to manage. This is an interesting key piece of it. You're starting to manage not just people in your local office. Obviously, then we're all in person. We're anchored in offices and things, but now the teams grew internationally, and so you're managing people remote, which is another element of it. You're remote to them, even though before everybody was remote, you're still remote to somebody if you have a dispersed workforce, right? So that was managing managers all over the country. And then after that was, along with line size changes going from SMB to mid-market and changing some of that segmentation, then I was managing directors or leading directors. So second line leadership role. So yeah, so that's what I'm in, and that's the kind of the current state, if you will.
And what changes when you're managing a director versus, an AE or manager? Like, is it kind of the same principles? Just, now you're, I don't know, but just at a higher level or like, how do you think about kind of that challenge?
Yeah. So great question. And it's a difficult one because the balance gets harder and harder. The things that you loved the things that you loved about the frontline leadership role, you're in deals all the time, they need help, and you get to be the fixer, although there's a balance there, and you want to be really cautious to not just come in and fix everything, right? You're teaching, you're coaching, you're not just fixing. But you do get to be involved in that. You get to see much quicker the outcomes of those conversations. So you do start getting a little bit further and further away from the day-to-day. That's one of the challenges, is to how do you prevent that from happening? How do you still keep your ear to the ground? How do you still keep yourself front and center in front of the reps? And I think the answer there is to break down barriers. One of the things that I try to, I can't say that I always do a great job. It's always a work in progress, but break down the barriers and not let I can't go talk to Chris because he's too busy. I can't go talk to Chris because the deal isn't big enough, or it's not vetted all the way through. And I work really hard to try to make sure that those barriers aren't there. That the same things that I love to do as a frontline manager, I still love to do. While at the same time, you have to be more strategic. While instead of the reps are being your customers, now your managers, your directors are your customers in this example. So that creates a lot more forward thinking. So it's a lot more strategic. You're always working 6-12 months in advance. You're trying to because things move slower, right? You can't make an immediate change like as a rep can and see an immediate difference. So that it's a comfortability level with just kind of, okay, we can put something into place. It's going to take a lot longer for it to get to the adoption level that we want at the rep level. then once that does become adopted, how are we going to track it? How are we going to then coach to it? So that the levers get bigger and they move a little bit slower. And then the last piece to it is you start introducing a lot more of those kind of HR positions, HR conversations. You're dealing with things that you didn't necessarily get into the role for, but it's a reality, and you have to learn that very quickly.
Do you find, are you also like managing more by numbers in this role too, where it's like, I assume each director owns a quota and then you're kind of like, and then whoever's, missing their quota, that's where you kind of laser in on it. Like, is that kind of a little bit more about how you think about the team? Because I think that's where I ended up when I was a VP at Lattice. Like, it's a little harder in marketing the numbers, but I tried to build this like numbers infrastructure where I could kind of laser in the eye of Sauron and be like, okay, there's the problem. That's because it's a little harder when you're so many levels above the frontline people where the actual challenge is.
Well, dead on. You're dead on. You don't necessarily want to. You don't want it to come across as you're only, trying to keep the individual contributors in mind at all times, and because you want to lose them in numbers. The numbers are for you, but yeah, you're the things that start becoming your senses of pride in that role are the ability to foresee risk in the number and really, really have forecasting buttoned down. So yes, you get really, really ingrained in the numbers, and you can start managing to those instead of leading through those. And they're very, very different things, right? Here's what I need you to do. Here's what you have to go do versus if you do this, this is what will happen. This is what will lead, that it'll lead to. That's a much different conversation and lands a lot better.
Yeah, super interesting. And I want to go back to one thing you mentioned a couple of minutes ago around managing remote teams and international teams. Like, that must have been a really crazy transition, an interesting transition. I mean, the good news is you already had the technology to support the transition, so you don't have to think about that part of the challenge. But what's that like? Like, I mean, what's it like managing a global sales team in different time zones, and sort of how do you think about managing the team and maintaining the team culture and also holding people accountable, all the things we've been talking about? How does that change?
Well, you touched on the most key word in all of that, and that's culture. That's a challenge for sure. But I think if you keep culture as your North Star, that guiding light, it definitely makes it easier and better. And I think also allowing subcultures to foster. Our office becomes our group, our team. What do you want to be known for? And I think fostering the mindset of what do you want to be known for? What are we going to be known for as an entire SMB mid-market department? But again, these are ideally all of their words, all of everybody else's collective words, not me or anybody else sitting there and saying, this is what we're going to be known for, whether you like it or not. Once you've established that culture, under making sure everybody's on board with that, but also being okay with the subcultures, great, okay, we're collectively, we're going to be the hardest workers. We're going to be the most strategic, whatever it is that you're going to hold a sense of pride around. But then, okay, Office A, great. What are you going to be known for? Office B, what do you want to be known for? And then it creates this really fun environment. You get the mini competitions. It's a little bit of bragging rights. We send trophies to different teams and things so what doing that allows you to do is celebrate success in at the kind of those tribe levels, while knowing that it's all raising everybody up at the same time.
And I imagine, each of those offices and the leaders have a lot of pride for each of the subcultures and their teams and a good friendly competition. I started my career basically as an SDR at Yelp, and we would have like teams, and whoever closed the deal would go up and ring the gong and things like that. And it was kind of silly, but but you did get excited when people on your team were doing it. I tried to kind of foster that culture, but yeah, too much cold calling for me though. Was pretty.
I'm still a big fan of cold calling.
Yeah,
so
it works. Yeah. Is that actually, while we're just talking about cold calling, is that like a big part of your outbound process today? Cold calling? Yeah.
Absolutely. You need to be very, very intentional about it. There's cold calling for the sake of cold calling, and that's not what works, and that's not what I'm talking about. you got to start with the who, right? Identifying who do you want to talk to and why, and understanding why that is, and getting really good at that. Then it's intentional cold calling, and that's super, super effective still.
Yeah, when you can catch someone in the right moment and have that impactful conversation or convince them a little bit to pay attention, it really, really works. I'd love to shift gears a little bit. And like, obviously Zoom is a generational company and has gone through quite a transformation over like the last decade. And you were a sales leader throughout all of this hyper growth. I'm curious, like, what was that like for you personally? Just keeping up with, I assume, so much change at the company, new initiatives, and just how did you sort of personally keep up with the company growth, and not only just keep up with it, but thrive throughout all of it?
That's an interesting question. I don't really know if it's truly how I kept up with it. I don't really know if I have a concrete answer. I think just personally, I love change. I'm a there's a certain, not always is this true for sure, but there's a general statement of if it ain't broke, break it. Since this feeling of being stagnant, especially in tech and in sales, I think if you're the better way to describe that would be a Kaizen mentality. If you're familiar with the mentality, but it's kind of like always trying to be better. And so when things are changing, I actually thrive in that situation when things are constantly changing, because it's very easy to get stagnant when they're not, and not always try to either self-improve or try to improve your surroundings or try to improve your team, try to improve the technology. I just love that environment. So I don't know if it's a good answer around just like a way to go do it or advice to how to be good in it. I just think it's a general love for always trying to figure out how do we avoid being stagnant. And so if it's being created for you naturally, because things are always changing, whether it's in the world, macroeconomics or your own company, I think you have to love being in that environment.
And is that why you've like been able to stay at Zoom for so long? I think, most people today are progressing their careers by job hopping and switching every year or two to something, especially in sales. I mean, it's crazy, like the amount of turnover, but you've worked there like 7+ years. And so I guess what has made you so committed to Zoom and also just kind of be able to thrive there for so long?
Yeah. And believe it or not, I hardly believe it myself, but about coming up on 9 years, which is
wow. Yeah.
I think part of the answer goes back to the very first thing I said around why I found Zoom in the first place. It's gratitude for a company for a product that is always trying to get better. And so when you're in an environment where innovation is constant, you don't have to go look at go look and say, oh, I need to go find the next innovative thing. If you're always being innovative and you're always trying to figure out ways to make things around you better. So I just think that constant change really does make it. I would argue that my experience has been multiple different companies within the same company, right? Whether it's my role has been different and it's more of a different role that I would have gotten at a different company, or just the company itself, the market that it's serving. I'm kind of getting that change through innovation and through market growth that you would probably try to go look for elsewhere. So that's one answer. Another important answer is personally. Personally, it goes again back to a little bit of loyalty of why did I try to get into tech in the first place? I tried to get into tech in the first place to find a product that really, really worked and to continuously be learning about how to progress in that industry. All of those needs have been met every step of the way. So I don't think personally I'm grateful for the opportunities that I've been given. And I think having that gratitude goes a long way.
I think there needs to be more people like you in tech. Honestly, I think it's such a fantastic answer and such just a good approach to career and life. And I think that's probably a great place to end the podcast. Chris, thank you so much for coming on. It was a really fun conversation to kind of hear like your mindset as you've gone through this amazing sales journey at Zoom. So really appreciate the time today.
Absolutely my pleasure. And I absolutely had a great time. Thank you.
That's a wrap on another episode of Grow and Tell. If you enjoyed the show, subscribe to us on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform, or find every episode at growandtellshow.com. I'm your host, Alex Krakov. Thank you for listening.